Hey, welcome back to the library. Let's jump into it. So this episode is without a script, so it's going to be a little bit of old man rambling. But this is a topic I've been trying to figure out if I wanted to cover or not. And in thinking about it, there's actually 3 different videos I could make. And this one's going to focus on sort of the midlife crisis angle, and a separate video down the road will deal with, for lack of a better term, visuals. But for the video at hand, let's talk about my midlife crisis. So if you were around for our present tense discussions and live chats, you'll know about the story about how when I realized I didn't need half my game collection and I decided to sell half of it off. At the time, I think it was somewhere over 4,400 games across multiple systems, and what it essentially was a nervous breakdown in the middle of a shopping mall parking lot. I realized I didn't need all the stuff I had, ended up selling it off. Well, 20 odd years later, I turned 46 in December, and I had a really weird midlife crisis. Like, if the universe is kind and I get to live to 90, I am now in the back half of my life. Shit's starting to matter, and it's starting to matter really quick. So, as I was sitting here in the game room thinking about stuff, I realized that if I want to do what I really want to do, and that is just tear the PlayStation library apart and find all the cool nuggets of information for you guys, find, cheats that no one's found before or maybe got wrong, review games that people weren't willing to review or have a chance, etc. I had to make a few changes both in the game room and in my general gaming life. And this is more for the video down the road, but the first important thing to know is that what you watch on YouTube shouldn't be interpreted as what you see on YouTube. Now, what I mean by that is there is a wall of games behind me. And that's because I decided to go for a full set and all the variants because I'm an idiot. And this is what I wanted. I really, really wanted this real bad because I know I'm going to play through all of them. The trick here is that you have to realize this doesn't signify anything other than owning the games. Like you might go, wow, he must have a lot of money, or he's really good on eBay. No, you're if you include all of this, you're looking at 3 times paying off a $20,000 credit card debt. So $60K on retail. I was indebted a lot. I just managed it really well. But from that tangent, the rest of that's for the later video. As I've shown before, the shelf behind me, it went PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Sega CD, and then I have smaller shelves that are usually off camera that had the PlayStation variants, and then my other complete libraries like the Dreamcast, the TurboGrafx, etc. And in having my midlife crisis moment the other day, I realized if I am going to focus on the PlayStation, I need to focus on the PlayStation. So in a normal midlife crisis, where you would maybe buy a motorcycle and travel the country or see 7 continents in a week, I just want to do what I want to do with Game-Rave. And 5 minutes after having that thought of I really just want to focus on the PlayStation, I tore my game room a new asshole. And let me explain. Going all the way back to childhood, video games have always been in my life. I was there for Pong. And for a game room isn't a reflection of what you are. It doesn't matter how many games you have, you're a gamer. It doesn't matter how many games you have, you're a collector if you kept them. But it's of who you are. And when I was a kid, my gaming setup, and I'm not kidding you, was an old CRT with the giant ass knobs and the bunny ears antenna in the kitchen of our apartment. And I played Nintendo on there. I played Super Nintendo on there. I played Commodore 64 on there. That was where everything was. It was just in that tiny corner of the kitchen, and it's what I had. As we moved on to new houses and so forth, and I got older and more expendable income came into my way, I was all about the games. When I was in my teens, my gaming library was this crazy, like 1980s wooden or early 90s, like wooden TV cabinet with the CRT, and then that glass door you open that would be normally for like maybe like a stereo or like a record player. I had all my game systems on there with the Super Nintendo being on the pull-out shelf because of the cartridge insertion. And that was all I needed. I literally had one corner of the cabinet filled with my Super Nintendo and Nintendo games, maybe like 2 Genesis games, and that was it. I was happy. I was a filthy casual, and I loved it. And then I got my dream job in Maryland, and unfortunately I don't have any pictures of those because those all left the building when my stuff was stolen in a burglary a while ago. But we jump forward to about 2005. In 2005, I was in the middle of a phase, and this is what the third video would be about. I was in the phase of collecting where I had that stupid thought that I was going to own at least one of every game known to man. I was going to have the library, or in some cases, as people might call it, the museum. I'm not kidding when I said I had over 4,400 games. And in the pictures I'm going to show you right now, at the time, who I was a collector who wanted one of every game. And because I was essentially living in an attic, paying rent, living in an attic, paying rent, my storage space was what I call warehouse style. And that is where everything is just fit where you can fit it. It doesn't matter if it's 6 rows deep, 10 rows high, on its side, in cardboard boxes. Like my loose Genesis cartridges were literally just in post office boxes as my drawer system. And I was living the dream. Like I loved it. Like I was doing research on everything. I was tackling 3DO. I was doing this and that. And then it wasn't until we moved out again into another house where I started to be less and less of the I need to have one of every game to where I was more of like, I really want the games I want. Like I know what systems I'm a fanboy of and I will die on a hill for. That should be the games I focus on. And that's when my game room was more a reflection of a sort of illustrative collector. Like I wanted to show off what I had. So I bought CD shelves and specific size shelves for my spare room that was now my actual first real game room. So I could display the PlayStation games in single file, and with the Saturn games, I think they were still 2 rows deep each, but I could display them in front with all the heavy hitters because I was in my show-off phase of collecting. It wasn't really until I got my own place that I got to hoard everything in my new game room, the second bedroom. And as you can see in the picture that pops up here, I didn't have a lot of room to work with. And as time went on, and I had originally sold off a lot of my collection to act as the down payment on my own place. So what you're seeing in this picture is literally already missing about, I'd say at that point, 1/10 of the collection. As the years rolled on and as gaming itself changed, I realized I was kind of falling out of present day gaming. Like I just didn't care for the DLC stuff outside of Mass Effect and Tomb Raider. And that's when I realized I was now in the librarian phase of my game room and of my personality. It was no longer about what I owned or how much it was worth. It was what I had and what I was doing with it. Bringing us back full circle to present day at my midlife crisis. If you've seen photos of my room posted, that is no longer the case. In the interest of what I would call self-preservation instead of self-advertising, The beautiful setup that you're used to behind me has now actually completely changed. I tore out all the Sega Saturn. I tore out all the Sega CD. I completely dismantled the shelf that was holding all of the variant PlayStation stuff. Put that in the garage. All the non-PlayStation stuff I have boxed up into containers that are now strategically hidden in the game room out of sight. And instead, I now have literally just the wall of PlayStation. Instead of Sega Saturn and Sega CD, I now have all my Game Shark stuff. I have all the demos. I have all the Lightspan filled out. And in wanting to make this video for you guys, besides just showing what I did with this as my midlife crisis, I also wanted to show you guys what the game room looks like on a typical day. I did vacuum, don't worry. Because part of the other video I want to do is pulling back the curtain. And what you're seeing now, this is actually what my game room looks like on any normal day. Just notes everywhere, things I'm checking on, researching. There's this poor sphere controller on the PlayStation. I kid you not. That has been opened like that with the controller out for 4 years now. I just keep forgetting to go back to actually play with it for the review and the article on Game-Rave TV. In this new setup, it gives me a better sense of purpose with Game-Rave.com and for my wanting to actually play through the entire library. With the Saturn and the TurboGrafx and the Neo Geo stuff all packed away, it is essentially out of sight, out of mind. Now, obviously, it's still on my Polymega if I want to play it, but that's going to be a rarity and not the normalcy. Instead of going crazy, like buying an arcade machine or a motorcycle, my midlife crisis is going big on my own content. There are a few like crazy little things I want to do as far as the YouTube things. Like I want to refresh Ken's music. I want to get a little more little animations here and there. I just need to find the time to sit down and create them. As we joked within a Facebook group of mine, like we're all at that stage where like we have to make decisions if we're playing a game or researching a game or making a YouTube video about the game, or in their cases, taking care of kids. I don't know if I was able to say what I wanted to say in this video, but it's basically I'm attacking my midpoint in life as a focal and fine-tuning point of how much I want to actually dedicate to the PlayStation research and reviews and videos for you guys. But because I knew this video was going to be super short, I actually asked you guys for questions and you guys came through in droves. So I have my notes in front of me, so that's what I'm reading. Let's get to the questions. Question number 1. Tim C asks, maybe what was your first actual video game system, or what was your very first PlayStation game you ever played, perhaps? First actual game system I played? Pong. I am an old man. Specifically, it was, I don't know if it was an actual Sears brand. It was like an Odyssey 200, Odyssey 300, something like that Pong system. It was one of those Pong systems where like it was actually Pong, tennis, or basketball, but all that changed was like where the center line was that the ball went across. As far as the very first PlayStation game I ever played, that belongs to Ridge Racer. Way back in the day, I used to be at part of an anime group that met every month, I think, where we traded tapes or, recorded VHS tapes from Japanese laser active discs or like did fan stuff like that. And there was a member there who always had the newest Japanese system. Like, I don't know what kind of crazy expendable income he had, but almost like literally like if you saw it in Die Hard fanzine, he had it the next month. And I remember playing his Japanese Sega Saturn with Street Fighter Alpha, and I remember thinking, wow, this isn't bad, but like the text is off in Alpha and so forth. And then the time came when he finally got his Japanese PlayStation he brought in, and he was playing Ridge Racer. And at the time, I was like a Mario Kart guy. I wouldn't say I was a racing game fan, but playing Ridge Racer in that moment, like it was like you could just see the hands reaching out from the TV and just grabbing me and going, "You're about to be one of us." I And then the next month, he brought it back, and he just happened to have I should say next month, but whenever the time was, he brought it back, and he had the Japanese Final Fantasy VII demo. All it took was casting Shiva in that demo, and I was like, "Yep, I'm getting a PlayStation. Yep, I'm getting a PlayStation." But yeah, Ridge Racer, the Japanese Ridge Racer, was the first game I ever played for it. And what makes it even funnier is he had the Japanese action replay for it, and the speed code they had for the Japanese version. The car would go so fast when you hit that little bump in the one track, you went straight up. I should see if I can burn the ISO and find that Game Shark code. It's hilarious. But thank you for the question. Next up is David M. asks, is your collection insured, and how often do you worry about a disaster event destroying it? Sadly, the collection isn't insured, and it probably should be. But the problem is that I believe in occurrences. And I say this without revealing the second half of your answer. If something were to ever happen to all this, like it was gone, I can flat out admit I'm out. I would probably sell the site to someone who I felt worthy of carrying on the name, maybe keep the name that they do, make it whatever they want. But if I lost all of this, like I have stuff that is literally one-offs, like the Lightspan online CD. It's been backed up. Don't worry. You can find it. But I would just take that as a sign from the universe that my time was over. Like, it's okay. You can move on. As far as do I worry about disastrous events destroying it? All the time, every day, every hour, every second. Two of the major impacts that I've had in my life as far as being terrified. One, going backwards. If you watch some of my older videos, you hear me talk about having to replace the windows or taking care of a water supply when I was recording in the living room. We had a situation where the tenant above us had, it wasn't her fault. Basically, her washing machine had pinprick, like pin-size holes. The plumber that was taking care of everything said he'd been a plumber for 30 years and never seen anything like it. But the pinprick was causing enough water to slowly dribble out, and it was collecting above my closet here in the game room. Now, obviously, we didn't know any of this because you couldn't hear anything. One day, I was looking out the window and noticed a wet spot on the sill, and I was like, "Oh, outside." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of weird. I wonder, like, where'd that come from?" I didn't think anything of it. I figured maybe it was just a bird or something. And then winter came, and I had put up plastic because of how cold it was. And I came in one day, and there was just water in the plastic. Like I could have poured it into a pot if I wanted to. So we took care of that. And finally, after trying to figure out what was going on, someone noticed the water dripping, and he ended up drilling a hole into the closet, and it just came pouring out. Now, thankfully, we were equipped. We'd already moved everything. We had rubber buckets and so forth. So I essentially had a water reservoir above my collection the entire time. Going backwards, probably the most eye-opening situation, and it's probably why I haven't insured the collection. One of the houses I used to live at was burglarized while we weren't there. I can remember sitting at the Jimmy John's on my lunch break from work, and I looked up and I saw my coworker running to the door, and I thought something happened at the store, and he was just like, "Dude, you got to go home. You guys got broken into, blah, blah." Where I used to work from that particular house, it was a 8-minute drive, if that. That 8-minute drive from that parking lot to my house took about 82 hours because my whole life flashed before my eyes. Now, I was obviously more worried about my other relatives in the house, but thankfully they weren't home either. When I got home and they finally let us in, a miracle had happened. Now, I had my bedroom where I recorded in, which just had like a couple of the systems and stuff. And then everything else, and I mean everything else, was in that smaller game room that I talked about earlier. The day before, my district manager had basically passed on, gifted to me, his entire video game magazine collection. And it was 28 banker boxes. And I mean 28 full banker boxes, to where after we had loaded my fiance's PT Cruiser, like, if this is where the Cruiser should have been, it was like here on its shocks. Like, it was, I would say, a metric ton of magazines and books. I had just finished, like, kind of like getting an idea of like how I wanted to sort them and so forth. And I was originally going to just bring them into the game room. That'd be good. But they were so heavy and I was so flippin' tired from work that instead I basically just stacked them in the doorway. So there was literally a, like, what, 3 or 4 by 5 or 6 boxes with another row of like 3 by 4 in front of them. So the most you could do is kind of just look in. And during the burglary, they must have realized the boxes couldn't be moved easily, because while my bedroom was absolutely ransacked and my Mac, my external hard drive, PS3, Xbox 360, Wii, PlayStation and stuff was just ripped out of the room and the room destroyed, the game room was literally untouched. Like, you could see over the boxes. So what I imagine is the one burglar must have been like, oh God, these are so, wow, damn. And then, took off. The fact that the process I went through just to replace those 3 game systems, including transferring the rights and so forth, like, it almost wasn't worth it. It really wasn't. Like, so, like I said, I probably should. I don't know how much extra it would be a month. I technically really can't afford it right now because I'm taking care of other things. Next question. Yakin K. When and why did you decide to try and collect every variant of every PlayStation 1 game? That's my buddy Steve, Papa Stu. He's a jerk. It's actually a 2-part question. I collected one of every PlayStation game because at the time when I was still in Maryland, I wanted a full Nintendo set, but freaking everyone was doing that. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to fight people. I don't want to outbid people for games I'm going to play once and never touch again. And I remember I was walking back into the apartment from my latest Funkoland run, and my brain just went, no one's doing PlayStation. And I went, well, I like PlayStation. Yeah, let's do it. The first 2 games I bought to prove I was going to go for at least one of every set was, I believe, Elemental Gearbolt. And I don't remember the second game. But it was 2 games I bought from the EBs that I was working at the time. Or I wasn't working at the time, but I would eventually work at the time because I was still at Game Shark. As far as the variant goes, so it started with Siphon Filter 3's 9/11 edition. I had walked into my old mom and pop video game store that I worked at that still sold video games as well as rented them. And I was talking with the owner, my former boss, and I was like, yeah, man, it's so crazy. Like, I was hearing about some story about how there's like a different cover of Siphon Filter that was yanked off because of the 9/11 thing. And he goes, oh, this one? And I went, what? And he looked over and he just pulled it off the shelf. And I was like, yeah, that one. And he goes, yeah, dude, it's complete. Just buy it. Here, I'll put it aside for you. Because Sony had a warehouse somewhere in Illinois that was a distribution and I think a parts and repair warehouse that this guy worked at. So all of his employee purchases were handled through there, and he just happened to buy this copy of Siphon Filter that hadn't gotten to the retail stores yet. To give you an idea, I bought my Siphon Filter 3 9/11 edition for $17.95 because that's what Siphon Filter 3 was worth at the time. God help you all. And then once I had that, Papa Stu and I were talking, and I believe, if I remember, he remembers better than I do. I believe he set me on the path of working designs variants because of the different disc artworks. And once I was on that, it was over. My life was over. My course had been set. And I think after that was when I started going into the greatest hits. And I was like, okay, this is cool, we're fine. But then within the greatest hits, I had found the first like ring variant and like some other variant. I was like, well, wait, if this is true for the greatest hits, what about the other black labels? Yeah. All it takes is a moment in time and your whole life shifts. Excellent question. Next up, from Chris J. Alternate reality Jason and what life could have been if you collected something other than games. That's actually a fantastic question, and that almost happened. I was almost not here talking to you guys right now. When I was, let me think about this. What year would it have been? So like 90, 93, 94, something there. It was before PlayStation. So like 93, 94. When the current gen at that time was the 3DO and the Jaguar and the Sega CD and the Jaguar CD, I could feel myself going through that growth spurt mentally where like I wasn't really a kid anymore, but I wasn't quite the adult. But I was like, I hadn't touched my video games in forever, and I wanted the money for like car insurance and, school and things like that. So the park district I used to work at was having a, I think it was the 4th of July or Memorial Day weekend flea market. And I brought all my stuff, my Super Nintendo. Now, obviously at the time, I wasn't a collector yet. I was just casual gamer. So I had like a Super Nintendo and like 10 games, all boxed, all complete instructions. God help me. Genesis, Sega CD. And I ended up selling a bunch of it to coworkers. I ended up selling it to a bunch of, I sold a bunch to passerbys and so forth. And I was literally down to just TurboGrafx and 2 games. And had that sold, I would not be here. I would probably be more of a real graphic designer as far as like actually spending my off time drawing and illustrating and, not researching variants and random stickers from 25 years ago. I don't think I would have, if nothing else, I might have collected maybe like a specific line of Transformer toys, like not all of them. Like I only need 3 more and I have the full alternator set, and that'd be good enough for me. I don't think I would have been a collector. I think I would have like just become a normal, sane human. I will say though, if I had to have picked, like that aside, somewhere in an alternate universe, I'm willing to bet there's probably a Jason who's collecting like comic books. Or if not comic books, maybe records or CDs. Like not so much today because like I'm lazy and I can get by with Spotify and YouTube Music and so forth. But like back in the day, I used to like love raiding music CD stores for cheap music CDs for stuff I'd never heard of. Like if it was $1, I'll check it out. So for stuff like that. But yeah, if my TurboGrafx 16, the 2 games had been sold, I would not be collecting anything. But it's because of that crazy story, and it's in one of the present tenses, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, like that one moment in time just changed my life forever. Great question. This is from Tyrannicus. I'd like to know what you would like to see from the Polymega beyond what we already know is coming. Good question. For me, I'm a simpleton. I would like to see them continue scraping what they can out of the base unit already. So easily would be like an adapter and a database for Master System games using the Genesis module. If possible, I'd like to see PCFX because that wouldn't need any new module. Like literally they have the 6 button from the TurboGrafx module. They're good. I know they're working on implementing memory card transfer between real PlayStation memory cards and the base unit. I believe they're trying to make that work with like the PlayStation PS3 memory card adapter. I would love to see them make a module that was literally just the memory cards and the controller ports for the PlayStation, the Sega Saturn, and then the controller ports for the Neo Geo. Like that would be like the end all be all module for me. I'd be totally amazing, totally happy with it. But yeah, still using my Polymega as my main too. Pretty good. Rayton Tradcath. Oh, Alan. How many innocent credit card 0% APR balance transfer offers were exploited in pursuit of your twisted desires? Technically one, but not really. I was not that smart at that time, and I paid a lot of credit card interest on a retail employee's paycheck. Like it was, I learned how to manage debt, but I probably managed that the wrong way. But I never missed a bill. I've never missed a payment on anything. But I can still remember the one Discover card bill that said I had owed $15,000 on it. Yeah, be very, very careful with how you handle life. Quick side story. When I finally paid off Discover card, I think the second time, I actually got a letter that was signed in ink from whatever regional manager it was, of them freaking out, thinking they were losing me as a customer because they saw my balance go to zero. It was hilarious. I wish I'd kept that letter. It was so funny. Michael W. actually has two, and he finishes off this video. Question 1. What does the PS1 mean to you that the PS2 doesn't? Or really any other system for that matter? That's a really deep question.
1 minute later.
I think with the PlayStation specifically, it was tied to so much of my life. So if you go back to it originally being the Super Nintendo CD-ROM, I was huge into Final Fantasy 2 and 3, UN Squadron, Ninja Turtles in Time, things like that. And believing that this CD add-on was going to come out, just the thought of like, the CD quality music or all that extra storage space was just, it blew my mind. Like I couldn't wait for it. And then when everything went down and Sony was like, nah, we're gonna make our own game system, I wasn't really hyped about it until, as I answered the previous question, that anime meetup where I got to play Ridge Racer for the first time. And I am not ashamed to admit this. 1995 was probably like my golden years as far as friendships, game systems. Like Neo Geo, PlayStation, Saturn, TurboGrafx, Sega CD, they're all in that 93 to PlayStation 2004 time frame. Like it was, for me, it was the golden era of everything I loved. You had all the arcade games on the Neo Geo and the Super Nintendo conversions like Ninja Turtles, UN Squadron, etc. Games that I could no longer play at the arcade, I could now buy as a home version. Even if it wasn't perfect, it was still my baby. Square had just hit their stride, like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy 7 or 8, 9, like Parasite Eve. Like the PlayStation itself was the first system where it felt like anything was possible. Like you didn't have to play it safe because Nintendo was charging $30 a chip for their Super Nintendo or the N64. You had media that you could print for almost nothing and send out demos just to see like what people were saying on the message boards about your game. Companies weren't afraid. Like Square was making baseball games, kart racing games, like first third-person shooters, and it never released here. It was CyberOrg. They are just doing ridiculous things, like the Pocket Station. Like at least in Japan, Konami was going crazy, as I did in the 20th anniversary video, with like all the music games and ZXD, the robot building game that was essentially Skylanders before it was Skylanders. It was such a time of just limitless potential and exploration and trying and rentals and, cheap used games. Like there was collecting and there was obvious like resellers and so forth back then, but it was never to the craziness that it is now. Like back then you wouldn't see people saying like, oh yeah, like me and a bunch of guys bought 300 copies of this game from Square so we could resell it. Like, no, like we all got to buy a game and have fun with it. Like I remember walking into like Target and they had like 80 copies of Final Fantasy VI for $20. I just bought one because that's all I needed. Like, I don't know. Like, but going back to the original point, like, especially with the PS2, to compare the PlayStation 1 to the PS2. So I will die on the hill that the PlayStation 1 was, is, and will never ever be again the golden age of RPGs that it was. I was at Game Shark when the PlayStation 2 launched, and because of all the work I was doing, I got our only unit at launch. Everyone else had to wait like a week or two. And as I was starting to play through games and so forth, I began realizing that things weren't coalescing like they should. When they hit the ground running, the PS2 had a whole ton of launch games, and they're really really good launch games. But like the genres that I liked, like arcade racing, like Ridge Racer 5 was good, but it didn't feel quite right. It didn't have the gusto that like Rage Racer or Ridge Racer 1 had. The early RPGs like Evergrace and Eternal Ring, and I can't remember what the other one was. Like they just felt generic. Now, unfortunately, that's just a byproduct of being a launch game. Everything's gotten used to things and so forth. There was also like the issues with the PlayStation 2 not having anti-aliasing. So like when Square released Bounce, I was like, oh my God, they're doing Bounce, it's gonna be fantastic. And after like 20 minutes of watching Vaseline and the same one bad guy 7 times on screen, it was like, oh, this isn't like Fighting Force. Oh, okay. That's cool. All right. The PS2, despite it being the best seller and having, twice the library size and so forth, the games that were on the PS2 did not attach to me or grab me like their original PlayStation 1 games did. Like to this day, I never played Metal Gear Solid 3. I maybe it's just because it was in the jungle, but I loved MGS2, but I just couldn't get into MGS3. Like when Burnout came out, I thought Burnout was really cool, but then I picked up an original Xbox, and the original Xbox had better versions, so I didn't need to buy them on the PlayStation 2. And I think around the time I got my original Xbox and realized how much better the games could look, and how much cooler they could do things with the hard drive at the time, I think my focus on the PS2 kind of shifted away, and it was never able to recover. At one point, I was actually going to try and collect a full PS2 set, just one of every game, not the variants. While I was still at Electronics Boutique, and I went all in. I would literally raid the dollar bin and the cheap bins, go home, give them brand new replacement cases, make them look nice and everything. And I think I got to 400 games. It was either 200 or 400. I think it was 400 because I had a lot of games. And like the parking lot moment of Zen, one day I was just doing something and my brain went, do you really need 23 more hockey games you're not going to play? And I was like, no, I don't. And I literally sold off all the sports games, turned to my fiance and was like, hey, pick out the PS2 games you want to keep. The rest are going. And she she kept hers, and I selected a few of mine to keep because you'll probably Transformers from my cold dead hands. And then I sold all of it off. I think I have less than 25 PS2 games of that, down from 400. And finally, Michael's last question. Actually, one more. What was the final PS1 game you purchased before your collection became the collection? What was the tipping point? That would be easy. That would be Spyro Collector's Edition. That was the absolute last thing I needed for one of every game. And after I had done that, I had famously drawn a comic that showed me buying it. And I literally was just like, I don't know what to do now. I have no meaning in life. I think that's when it really did become the collection. And I decided to focus on that. And then in previous answers, my buddy Steve started putting things in my head. And that's when I just became the dedicated PlayStation fan, and eventually the biggest PlayStation fan, according to Sony and Peeps. But yeah, it definitely was the tipping point. Once I realized I was going for the full set, I realized I was no longer the filthy casual as far as the PlayStation goes. Now, what's funny is every other system aside from my fanboy ones, I am Johnny Casual. As casual as you can be. Like, I think I have 4 PlayStation 3 games. I have maybe 20 PS4 games, and that's including the digital ones. I only have like 20 games, and it takes up, 2 terabytes of information. You guys, these were amazing questions. I hope you liked the video for my midlife crisis. Like I said, it wasn't anything crazy. It was just me stripping my game room down to be the PlayStation room so I can help you guys. Have you had a midlife crisis yet? Have you had a quarter life crisis yet? Let me know down below in the comments. Let's get the conversation started. If you guys have any questions, I'm always here, or on Discord or on Twitter. Let's hang out. Take care, you guys. Be safe.